Welcome to the great debate. Cloud storage is DOA. Just a couple of quick
He's
announcements.
leaving. He's gone. Oh well. I win.
The workshop evaluations will be emailed to all the attendees 15 minutes before the end of the workshop. Please fill out the evaluation. We do use those to figure out what we're going to do for the next Interop, and your feedback is valuable. Keynotes tomorrow will be 8:30 to 10, and then another round from 1 to 2. And the expo floor will be open from 10 to 5 as well. And keep your eyes on the @Interop Twitter account, as well as the #Interop Twitter tweet stream. So, our topic, cloud storage is DOA. Howard Marks is going to be arguing that cloud storage is in fact DOA. Stephen Foskett is going to be arguing that it is not. Now, when I asked him to do this great debate, I asked him to take an extreme view. So, like a classic debate, they're going to argue for their point. Obviously, what they really think in real life is going to be much different. Nobody thinks cloud storage is really DOA.
Nobody?
Why are we here?
I do.
I think maybe some of these guys.
Of course it is.
Because we're going to, okay.
It's the stupidest thing I ever heard of the quote against.
You're not starting yet.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So it's
Sorry
going to be an
about that.
organized debate. They're going to do 10 minutes each of opening remarks, then each 3-minute rebuttal, and they're going to open up for questions for you guys to ask questions. And then at the end, they're going to do a 2-minute wrap, final remarks, and then we're going to vote and see who wins. So keep track. I do have a couple of questions queued up so we can get things going, but definitely, if you have questions, ask them the hard questions, try and stump them. So with that, we're going to start with Howard, who's going to tell us why cloud storage is DOA.
Thank you, kind sir. So, to examine why cloud storage is a bad idea, we have to start by examining why people think cloud storage is a good idea. And in general, when you ask people why is cloud storage a good idea, they say, because cloud storage is cheap. And let us examine that. If you put 50 terabytes of data on S3, and S3 is generally considered to be the value leader among the public cloud providers, in 2006. The S3 storage rate in 2006 was 15 cents per gigabyte per month. Now, 15 cents is a small amount of money, but a gigabyte is a small amount of data today. 50 terabytes for 4 years at 15 cents per gigabyte per month would end up with you sending your friends at Amazon a series of checks that totaled $360,000. Now, today, Amazon's prices have come down. Amazon's prices have not come down nearly as quickly as the price of disk drives or the price of complete storage systems, but they have come down. So instead of $360,000, you would only have to pay $260,000. Clearly, we can do storage in the data center for substantially less than $50 per terabyte per year. Excuse me, $5,000 per terabyte per year. The problem is the comparison that's made is always facetious. Excuse me, specious. People say it only costs 15 cents to store a gigabyte at Amazon for a month, and it costs $1.50 or $2 or $3 to store a gigabyte on the Symmetrics in my data center when I include all of the ancillary costs of storing the data on the Symmetrics in my data center. I have to back it up. I have to have people who manage it. I need pointy-headed experts we call storage administrators who worship at the temple of storage, determining exactly how many spindles are necessary to provide the necessary performance. Notice, however, that Amazon or Rackspace or Nirvanix or S3 does not store your data on a Symmetrics. They store your data on a server with disk drives, and they have many, many, many servers with disk drives and sophisticated software to distribute the data across those servers. Since we're talking about 50 terabytes, And over lunch today, I could find a website who would be glad to sell me a 72 terabyte NAS system. Well, 72 terabytes is about right to put RAID 6 on it and have the overhead 50 terabytes of net. So I went to Aberdeen, and they would sell me this device. It's 5U. It's got a Xeon server. It's got 3 terabyte hard drives. It runs Linux, so we have NFS. And if you run Samba SIPs to talk to it, the other problem with cloud storage, it's an object store, and every public cloud storage provider has a different API. Your users cannot simply click on a file and say, send this off to Amazon and store it there for me. You have to build an infrastructure, the cost of which was never included in these calculations, to say, get the data from my users out to the Amazon or Rackspace or Nirvanix cloud so that they can use it. So that Aberdeen server on the web is $22,000. But you say, the big advantage of putting data in the public cloud is I never have to back it up. But remember, service providers' idea of backup and corporate IT people's idea of backup are very different things. If you send your data to S3, they will keep your data safe and back it up, right? Every time there's a Gmail outage, the Gmail goes away. And Google restores that Gmail because Google does backups. By the way, Google does backups to tape, but that's another debate whether tape is actually dead or not. But when a service provider does backups, those backups are there only to protect the data against a system failure. When a corporate IT guy does backups, those backups are there not only to protect the data against a system failure, but to protect the data against the much more common failure which occurs between the keyboard and the chair. So you, when you do backups, take a full incremental backup, a full backup once a week, an incremental backup every night, and you keep all of them for months so that you can revert to any previous version. S3 simply says whatever data you put there last, you will be able to recover. If somebody deletes something or screws up a file, and you call Amazon, and let us not even go into how much fun it is to call Amazon and get support, but if you call Rackspace or Nirvanix or AT&T, who have more robust support organizations, and you say, well, my senior vice president deleted all of his important spreadsheets. We'd like you to recover them. And he's not sure when he saw them last, but they were definitely there a month ago. Could you go to the month-old backup and restore them for you? Imagine what the response at the other end of the phone might be. It's going to be somewhere between, I'm sorry, sir, that's not a service we really offered. Please refer to the service level agreement that you signed when you signed up for our service, and hysterical laughter. So, to provide a level of protection roughly equivalent to what you would get from a public cloud provider, I went back to the website and I said, okay, we buy these servers, this NAS system from Aberdeen, and we're going to pay 15% a year for maintenance because that's what everybody charges for maintenance. I'm going to buy a second system, and maintenance on the second system is going to be another $35,000, and I'm going to run RSync because now every data I write to the primary system gets synchronized to the secondary system. It's the same level of protection. Then the next line that someone, my esteemed colleague, I'm sure is going to bring up is that I now have 2 NAS systems in my data center and I have to pay for power and cooling. Well, the Aberdeen website did not actually have a power usage for this device, so I arbitrarily assumed it uses 2 kilowatts. It might use as much as 3 kilowatts, but knowing what I know about storage, 2 kilowatts was an educated guess. At 18 cents a kilowatt hour, which is what I pay in New Jersey, which is higher than the national average, and an assumed power utilization efficiency of 2, which means for every watt of power I use, I spend a watt for air conditioning, I'm going to pay over the 4-year time frame we're talking about $2,200 to my friends at PSE&G. Total cost for this solution over 4 years, $75,000. Let us assume it is much more complicated to manage than keeping data in a public cloud, and I need to hire a full-time administrator for these 2 NAS boxes. That's another $75,000, because full-time administrator is really working 2 or 3 hours a day, doesn't have to get paid all that much. Maybe he'll work, it's only a half-time administrator, but call it 75 grand. So now I'm spending $150,000 for the 4-year life of 50 terabytes of data at roughly the same protection level, as opposed to $260,000 to do it at S3. I have not included the cost of the high-speed internet connection that I need to get data up to S3 and down. If you have a 100 megabit per second Ethernet internet connection, and you can keep that 100 megabit per second internet connection fully occupied, how long does it take to transfer 50 terabytes of data to a cloud storage provider? 62 days. What's the latency? Well, it's the internet. It's 20 to 40 milliseconds. Are you going to run an application like Oracle across a link that's 20 or 40 milliseconds? No. Public cloud storage is expensive, but they sell it in little tiny units, so the price is low. Imagine that the price on a gas pump was per ounce. Gasoline would look cheap. That's the fraud that the public cloud providers are committing upon us, the IT professional. They are selling us that it's 15 cents a gigabyte a month, not $260,000 for 4 years. I need a high-speed internet connection. I'm going to have high latency. I need special applications or gateways to talk to this thing. All of those add to my costs. If you're willing to, in your data center, have an infrastructure of the level of reliability and quality that you're renting at that public cloud storage provider, you can have higher performance, the same level of reliability, except of course for that once a year when some idiot with a backhoe cuts your internet connection. And at the end, you will own 2 servers which will be worth $500 or $600 and you can put in the lab in your basement. So, public cloud storage is slow. It's expensive. It requires special protocols and programs and gateways to talk to. It is of limited use and should be banned. Thank you very much.
Oh, Howard.
Jane, you ignorant slut.
Let me clear away this terrible mess. Oops. Let me do whatever I have to do to
Yeah, you're a
make
math
this
guy, we understand.
work. I just don't understand these legacy systems that you've got here, these old-fashioned, out-of-date systems that just try to continue and perpetuate the status quo instead of coming back to the core question. The core question is not what are the little itty-bitty bits of a cloud storage solution and how is it built and how much, would it cost me to build something that's kind of like that in my basement with some junk I downloaded off the internet. The core problem here is that when people talk about cloud storage, they look at it all wrong. And I say that as somebody who looks at a lot of things all wrong. I admit it. It's really hard to know what you don't know. But what a lot of IT people don't know, especially IT infrastructure people, and I'm an IT infrastructure guy, is that basically none of this that we've been building and shepherding and working on for all this time, none of this is intrinsically good. Storage arrays and block storage and disk drives and SANs and yes, networks and applications and all of this. None of this has any intrinsic value whatsoever. And we can look at the trees, which is the disk drives and the RAID sets and the software, or we can actually ask ourselves, what is the point of this that we're building? And I think that it's very simple for all of us to see examples in the world of people who get things wrong by getting things right. Basically, in the IT industry, it's the same story again and again, where people, Mr. Gates, big enterprise companies, they get things wrong in terms of strategy by getting things right in terms of tactics. And they look at, how can I continue to do what I've always done? How can I expand my market? How can I protect my current products? How can I protect my friends at the other vendors in the industry? Cloud storage is a massive, massive threat to the status quo. And not just the storage status quo, because cloud storage is not an individual entity. Cloud storage is part of a much bigger picture, a much bigger threat to the status quo of IT. Cloud computing, real cloud computing, is a big threat. And what do companies do when they're faced with a threat? Well, they minimize it, they try to embrace and extend and extinguish it. They do all they can to stop it from happening, but it's not going to stop. And the thing that people, I think, fail to realize is that there are examples where the exact same thing is happening all around us. I mean, when you look, how many of you guys have an iPhone? Probably most of you, or an Android phone, right? These devices are extremely different from the devices that came before. And yet we had companies like Nokia and Motorola saying, oh, we're not worried about smartphones because we have such a wonderful market in our feature phones, and there's no way that they're really going to chip away at our lead until the whole side of the mountain collapsed. And now Nokia and Motorola are in the rubble at the bottom. And frankly, that's the situation that enterprise IT faces unless we in enterprise IT learn to do things differently. I'm kind of a radical because I would love to get rid of SCSI, I would love to get rid of RAID, I would love to get rid of so many things that we consider fundamental elements of enterprise IT. And the reason I want to get rid of them is because they're not serving the purpose that they're supposed to serve. All they do is perpetuate the existing way of doing things. So let me ask you, how would you reframe storage? If you were going to do this again, if you had nothing, if there was no enterprise IT, how would you build enterprise IT? Would you build huge PCs, like huge desktop computers that ran wobbly monolithic operating systems and talked to fake disk drives that were connected over lying networks that said, I'm a channel, I'm not really a network. I'm reliable, I'm not unreliable at all. And would you actually build things this way? Would you build a RAID system? Would you base your entire storage environment on a protocol that really literally is, I'm just a fake disk, here's some random blocks of storage, do with them whatever you want, I'm just going to throw up my hands? Of course not. You would build a system that was tightly integrated with the application, that included advanced and useful features like indexing and version control and distributed locations and replication and snapshots. You would not build it to be fixed in size. You would build it to have no size limitations. You would build it so that everything you store in it gets stored regardless of the size of the drive that you made when you installed the system 2 years ago. You would build it so that the system could grow and that the data on that system could be migrated to the next system and the next system. Well, this isn't just a facetious or this isn't just a dream. This is actually what's being built. And if you go out there and you look at the next generation of application developers, you should be pretty scared if you're an IT infrastructure. Because the next generation of application developers, they don't care about what we're doing. They don't care about SANs and NAS and storage arrays and computers and operating systems. Every application developer who's working on next generation applications are writing to platforms. They're writing in C#, they're writing to Azure, they're writing to Google App Engine, they're writing to, all of these things, these different environments that don't have the same kind of limitations and the same kind of backward-looking compatibility. And what's going to happen is that, you look around right now and we're Nokia and we're Motorola and we're looking around and we're saying, I don't see it. Stephen, you can say that, and you can say they're building all these, platform-based web scale applications, but I don't see it. I'm still using Exchange, and I'm still using SQL Server, and I'm still using SAP, and I'm still using all the same applications that I always did. But that's a fundamental mistake, because what you're not seeing is the entire next generation of IT moving to cloud platforms, real cloud platforms. Now, I mentioned that the enterprise companies, what their first response was to say, pish posh. That's not real enterprise IT. That's some joke software and joke hardware suitable only for the internet. I remember when iSCSI got the same thing. iSCSI had a bad reputation because of that little letter I. Internet SCSI, seriously? That's not real infrastructure. Well, the same thing is happening with these web scale applications. But while the enterprise companies all say, we don't need to worry about that, the next generation is changing. And what's going to happen is, in the long term, applications are going to be built the way that they should be built, and the way that it makes sense for them to be built, which is to have an intelligent storage platform that's a service to the application, that doesn't rely on conventional POSIX file system calls, and doesn't rely on conventional SCSI interfaces, that takes data from the application, that intelligently manages that data for the lifetime of the data, and then gives the data back when it's done. Nobody in their right mind would build what we all manage on a daily basis, especially not today. Now, this all sounds very forward-thinking, and it would be nice to be able to say, yes, cloud storage is dead so far, but the truth is it's not even dead so far. Cloud storage is actually taking off in the enterprise, real cloud storage. And again, I keep coming back to real, because you can't just put the word cloud in front of something and call it cloudy. Real cloud storage, API-driven object storage on a global scale, is taking off in the enterprise. And there are many, many examples of this. And again, it's hard sometimes to kind of look through the haze and the fuzz and the cloud washing. But the fact that companies like Amazon and Rackspace and Nirvanix and others are out there selling this stuff, the fact that Verizon has a successful cloud storage business indicates that it isn't just Web 2.0 applications. It isn't just Dropbox and Facebook that are using this stuff. Somebody else is using it. And I'll tell you that somebody else is using it, because I've been there. My disclaimer, I worked at Nirvanix for a year, helping them to figure out what their enterprise strategy would be for selling cloud storage. And frankly, in that time, I saw many, many large enterprise environments, and they were willing to look beyond some of these, tactical issues. And I will take them in turn, and I will talk about price, and I will talk about, I made some notes here of Howard's arguments, and I will talk about, the equivalency of a an Aberdeen array versus an Amazon S3. But the bottom line is that these people have also done that same analysis. And when their analysis came through, they decided that it was by far better to go with a cloud storage solution than it was to go with a build your own storage solution. And I think that all of you guys, whether you believe in it or not, you may come out of here saying, you know what? I won't say that cloud storage is, the greatest thing since sliced bread. I don't expect you to say that. But I do expect you to walk out of here and to say, you know what? Cloud storage is not dead on arrival. In fact, it's very much alive, and it looks like it's got a strong future.
Great opening remarks. Howard, 3 minute rebuttal.
He stole my pen. He doesn't want me to reply him.
Here, have another Mandalay Bay pen. Put it with the unicorn tears you used to describe excuse me. My
choked up there.
esteemed colleague. There's a difference between choked up and broke up. My esteemed colleague said storage has no intrinsic value. He said that we should not be using disk drives. He implies that this miraculous new unicorn tier powered storage system based entirely on isolinear chips will solve all of our problems. Then he goes on to conflate cloud compute with cloud storage. Certainly, if your compute attributes are in the cloud, your storage should be there with them, because having storage in your data center and servers at rack space is introducing latency that simply makes no sense. But our argument here is not, is cloud computing dead on arrival, but is strictly about cloud storage. He said that the major vendors view cloud storage as a threat, and being a threat, they wish to stamp it out. And EMC has produced Atmos, and Atmos powers AT&T Synaptic Cloud. It clearly appears that EMC is attempting to stamp out public cloud storage by providing the hardware upon which it runs. Until someone replaces the disk drive, we are going to be using SCSI. Whether my esteemed colleague accused us of having multiple layers of lies, that they're fake disk drives and fake protocols. And then he says we should put another layer of lies and not talk to that disk drive as a fake disk drive, but invent a completely new abstraction, object storage. We shouldn't have POSIX ACLs, we should just have get and put. We should never be able to modify an object in place. It should just create another object. He says we should have indexing and version control, but the products that we're talking about, public cloud storage, S3, AT&T Synaptic Cloud, do not provide those facilities. You don't get indexing as part of S3. You could fire up an EC2 instance and have an index engine run on it, but your data isn't indexed when you pay 15 cents a gigabyte a month. That's an optional extra. Similarly, snapshots. There's no such thing as a snapshot in object storage. Object stores have immutable objects. If you want to modify it, you get it, you create a new version, and you put the new version on a file, which is on an object by object basis. That's not a snapshot. I can't see how all of my objects looked at 4/27/26 a.m. on a specific date. I can just have versions of the objects. And oh, by the way, if I have 27 versions of a 1 megabyte object, I pay for 27 megabytes of storage every month. If I want to drag it down and put it back up, I pay for transfers. It's a way to milk your wallet. It's a method of getting a few cents out of you every moment. Go down to the Mandalay Bay Casino and notice how many penny slots there are. When I started coming to Las Vegas in the 1980s, penny slots were relegated to smoky back rooms in downtown casinos because they would only take 5 pennies. Today, major casinos have penny slots because you can bet up to 10 cents on each of 5,000 different propositions on them. And that's what cloud storage is. It's a way to take a few pennies from you over and over and over again. Thank you very much.
How does this work, my friend? Do I get to respond to that?
I love it.
All right.
That's good from this side.
I'm sorry, unicorn tears, Atmos, milking your, who wants to milk your wallet?
Your former
I'm
employers.
sorry, but I believe that the enterprise computing and storage companies have gotten very, very good at that.
No, they take money in much bigger chunks.
Yes, that's true. That's true. They why milk when you can have the whole cow? Okay. Now let me clarify. Cloud storage doesn't go with cloud computing just because they happen to be in the same building. Cloud storage being in the same building with cloud computing is nice, but that's not the bottom line. The bottom line, the reason that it's important, is that building web scale applications requires writing to a platform, not an operating system, and not a bunch of hardware. And similarly, when you're building that web scale application, you're going to use web scale protocols for storage and for, every element of it. It's the architecture of cloud storage that makes it work well with cloud computing, not the physical location of it. The fact that it is accessible in a way that is useful to applications that's useful.
Oh yeah,
I am
accessing
not,
data across the internet is way faster than
I am not a programmer. I am not a programmer. But I was able to integrate Amazon S3 in PHP, using PHP libraries with my blog. And I was actually able to build that myself from scratch because it was so amazingly, wonderfully, eye-openingly, gloriously simple. It's one of those things that you kind of have to see to believe. And the trouble is that today's developers, I mean, think about who's going to college today, and think about, all of those people out there that are going to events like this, except for developers. They're all seeing it on a daily basis, and they're seeing how useful it is to be able to say, here, put some data over there. Oh, hey, I want this data back. Can I have that back? And to reference it based on something that is useful programmatically, instead of saying, hey, I need to reference this exact specific location on a disk drive. And yes, that disk drive is a lie. Everything we build in IT infrastructure, virtualization is just a synonym for lying. That's what virtualization is. It's a way to build a stack of lies so that we can perpetuate this fake PC world that we live in. The fact that all of our alleged applications in enterprise computing are supposed to be running on this PC operating system or this Unix operating system. Honestly, none of it makes any sense. It doesn't make any sense to build an application with 200 servers, each doing a little fraction of the work. It makes sense to build an application that references a platform that is entirely divorced from hardware, that you can scale that platform without having to worry so much about scaling the hardware. Now, it's true that not all services are equal. Not all services include indexing. Certainly most services don't include features like transcoding, but some do. It's also true that not all storage arrays are equal. We can't say cloud storage is bad and useless because storage arrays have, deduplication and thin provisioning and compression and encryption and replication and snapshots and mirroring and all these other things, because a lot of them don't. And if they do, they work different ways and they have different APIs. Doesn't that sound kind of like what Howard was saying about how you actually access cloud storage? He said there was no standard interface for cloud storage. That's what you said.
I did. And
you did say that.
There is no standard interface for cloud storage, but
how hard is it?
The complication of there being different APIs for snapshots on enterprise storage. Under the rules of debate, you had to bring that up in your original. You can simply be rebutting now.
Is there a Robert's Rules of Orders expert in here? What I'm trying to get at. What I'm trying to get at is that so yes, there is no clear, defined de jure standard for cloud storage, but there are de facto standards.
Well, actually, there is a de jure standard. There's that stupid sniff thing.
And yeah, okay, there we go. But there is a de facto standard. Frankly, the Amazon S3 interface has become widely used. I mean, if you want to build your own S3, you can just download OpenStack, and it was amazing. for me to actually experience how easy it is to build that. I mean, it's just a series of commands, and you can have your own entire cloud platform up and running. Now, EC2 is not necessarily the best cloud compute platform, but it's something. But S3, honestly, is pretty good, and OpenStack is pretty good as well. And so we're getting to the point where we're going to have a de facto standard. It's important to realize that, you know, SCSI and Fiber Channel and NFS and all this stuff that we love was not designed explicitly to be a standard. It became a standard because people used it. And I think that what's going to happen in cloud storage is that people are going to use it. The difference being that cloud APIs are ridiculously simple. Just a few commands. And so it's actually not that hard if you're building one of these applications to access multiple clouds and multiple different APIs, because they're fairly similar in concept, and there's only a few commands that you have to worry about anyway. So, plus, of course, there are gateways, which we heard mentioned. There are, you know, interfaces that allow you to access multiple services. All that is true. So, I think that actually I'm running out of time, but you know, to say that cloud companies are bad because they're just after your money, well, that seems really ridiculously out of touch with reality when we're all sitting here talking about these major enterprise computing companies. Okay.
Okay, now let's open up the Q&A. Does anybody have a question for our panel that they can argue?
Oh, I see.
Jason, this is going to be good.
I'm going to run the mic over so that we can hear on.
So you mentioned that so SCSI is a dead protocol, but the reality of it is the guys that are building these cloud platforms are still using SCSI to address the disk space that is, you know, part of the underlying technology. So is that really an argument?
Well, I would go.
Or are you just saying that you're extracting it?
Well, I would go further, and he says OpenStack Swift is simpler than a file system, but OpenStack Swift is a layer that runs on top of a file system.
Well, that's true.
And it's not, you know, to say it's simple to do a get put on an object, well, I don't know, open smith.doc doesn't seem like a complicated concept to me. Comparing object storage directly to, well, if you had to write your own applications to talk to the disks and do your own RAID, it's much simpler. I will give you that point. But whether it's writing to a new API is all that different than writing to the file systems we've been dealing with forever.
Yeah.
Plus, you said it would be stupid to write an application that uses 200 servers and divides the application up into little slices, but that's how the web scale applications you're talking about work. You're advocating that there be a standard interface layer in between, which I will grant you would be way better than doing that myself.
I couldn't have said it better myself. That is exactly what I'm advocating, is that there should be a standard
but it's
interface
still
layer.
what you're saying is someone else should slice, dice, and Juliet.
Yes, exactly. Why are we going to reinvent the wheel? Why are we going to
Someone has reinvented the wheel and you want us to use it.
Yes,
That would be good.
exactly. And that's the thing. People have invented things that work. They've invented ways of making this stuff work in a standard, scalable way. And as far as saying, yeah, you're right. It's not like the disk drives are going to stop having SCSI protocol or ATA protocol. The difference is that we don't need to go that deep into the layer anymore. We can just let the platform handle that stuff, and we can have software float above it. And the value of that.
Aren't you saying that your lies are better than my lies?
I am. I'm saying that my lies are better than
You're
your
saying
lies.
just add another layer of abstraction to make it simpler.
Exactly, because my fantasy life is way better than your reality.
I'll give you that. Did the gentleman in green have a question?
Yes.
So in today's world of economic
Turmoil.
let's go with turmoil or instability, it's called, on the worldwide stage. Although I fundamentally agree with Stephen's cloud concepts. So,
But why don't we just leave it right there? Thanks for
but the question is it dead on arrival? And if you look at the pure economics and how to sell something to CEOs and management, it gets really tough to say, hey, I can put something in for $120,000. Oh, by the way, if I put it up in the cloud, it's $260,000, or I'm sorry, $150,000. oh, by the way, it's 260. The CEOs don't give a crap about all that underlying stuff. It's kind of like this iSCSI versus protocol stuff that we're
Exactly, 'cause they
talking
shouldn't
about
care
here.
about that
they,
stuff.
they don't give a crap. They just want to see lower
Unicorn shares
CapEx,
are overpriced.
OpEx costs.
But
I want to hear your rebuttal toward how you approach that with the CEO when you give them the actual hard numbers.
Well, I think that it's actually a pretty, that's a really, really good point, and it's very, very true. If you look at it the way that Howard has presented it, it really doesn't look like it makes a lot of financial sense. But if you look at it a little bit differently, it might, and that's that most projects kind of go nowhere for a long time. Most forecasts of capacity needs are ridiculously wrong. Most companies buy on a project-by-project basis, and then they end up robbing from Peter to pay for the next Paul who comes down the pike. There are all these realities of enterprise IT that don't really match up with the promises that we like to make.
And
one of the
not
biggest,
the smallest of which is it's a rare corporation that would actually put those Aberdeen NAS devices in their data center.
yeah,
You know, that I went there because it is roughly the same level of reliability, but
I'll even take you on that one.
well, no, it's roughly the same level of reliability as the hardware they use, not as the
As the
service they
hardware
provide.
they use, yes, not as the service they provide. But
But the truth is, it would be
let
hard.
me finish.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So.
We're taking this act on the road. We'll be here all week.
But the difference is that one of the coolest things about storage as a service and cloud storage generally is that you're not buying the same way. Instead of buying, a big chunk, you're actually buying sort of as you go. Now, it's a fallacy to say that enterprises are going to buy cloud storage the same way that I buy my stuff. Enterprises buy cloud storage kind of the same way that I buy Dropbox, which is to say that you make a commitment for a certain level and that's it. And then if you exceed that commitment, then you make another commitment. It's not like we're putting, my Amazon S3 literally is how many gigabytes were there for this month, and I'm going to charge you $2.13 for that. And by the way, that is actually my latest Amazon bill, $2.13, which is honestly a pretty good deal considering how much data I have up there. But corporations are not going to buy $2.13. What they're going to do is they're going to say, we're going to commit to X number of terabytes on average over the period of this year. But the cool thing is that they don't then have to say, we screwed that up and now we don't have enough storage for our applications. Because anytime they want more, they can just get more because the whole system is scalable. And that's what that does is it gives you
on the failed project, you don't pay for the storage you didn't use.
Exactly, and it thank you. It gives you it's like thin provisioning.
Oh wait, I'm arguing your side? Whoa.
Except
Sorry.
thin provisioning that includes everything. That includes the SAN and the array and the data center space and everything. Because really, you're only using, you're only paying for what you use, sort of. I mean, you're not exactly paying for what you use, but you're paying for close to what you use. And that's actually really, really cool. And it's a really big differentiator too, because storage is so ridiculously underutilized. Now, if anybody wants to go there, that would be a really good question.
By the way, at this point, I'm going to drop the Stephen Colbert Act and actually tell you what I think.
Uh-oh. Does that mean that I have to too?
Yes.
Okay.
We've for the last 10 minutes, we're going to switch from
Is it the
ridiculous
last?
to honest.
Let's do that. That'd be good.
Wait, no, it's a debate. You have to argue your point.
Fine. Stephen, you moron.
I'm sorry. All right, do we have another question?
You kind of made part of my point, which is that, and this is a decision that you make the CFO involved, because a VMAX, let's say with 40 terabytes, about $1 million, you're going to be looking at CapEx that can be depreciated, where with cloud storage, you can't depreciate that. That's going to be expense. So someone's going to want to look at that and weigh that before that decision's made. So I guess not really a question to speak.
Yeah, and actually, I think it's important to note, in the interest of honesty, even though, of course, I am totally still arguing, enterprise cloud storage contracts are $1 million contracts, multi-million-dollar contracts. This is not put it on your Amex. And I want to make sure that everybody understands that. Like I said with the S3 thing, if you're going to use cloud storage for business, you're going to go to these companies and you're going to get an RFP. RFP, and you're going to talk to a salesman, and you're going to do the things that you would do as if you were buying hardware, honestly. And it is really, it's one of those things that, kind of gets glossed over when people think cloud storage. They do think of like, I'll put it on my credit card, and of course some people do that, but these are really, really big chunks. And yes, you're right. It's basically an expense. It's a monthly expense. Now sometimes, that can cut both ways. Sometimes that helps. Sometimes it doesn't. And
VMAX is a bad comparison.
I just got a quote on it, so I know the price.
Right, but even if you're in EMC, it would be VNX or Atmos.
Okay, that's
'cause-
500,000.
because-
That's 5,500.
Yeah, because we're not talking about that level of performance for cloud storage because of latency.
And you're getting a slower solution, like, back to his question, on your budget, do you add more bandwidth into your environment for this new cloud solution?
Most of the time, if you're going to really use a cloud storage solution, you're going to have to increase your bandwidth.
More monthly cost.
And a lot of the large enterprise accounts that Steven's talking about, they have dark fiber or gigabit links into the data center where the cloud storage provider is.
Yeah, if we want to actually debunk some of these myths right now, myth number one is that you pay as you grow on a per gigabyte basis, which is just not how it works with enterprise cloud storage.
Depends on scale.
Myth number two, if you're really little, but myth number two is the bandwidth thing. I pay Amazon for bandwidth. If you're an enterprise and you go to one of these guys and you talk to the enterprise account rep, you're going to get that bundled in.
Yeah, you won't pay the cloud storage provider for bandwidth, but
pay
you
your own.
still need a pipe.
Yeah, but a lot of people, what they'll find is that it's actually cheaper just to buy a dedicated line. Buy yourself a gigabit link from here to Amazon. And I know that sounds insane because that's like $30,000, $40,000 a month. Well, it's nothing compared to the cost of the overall solution. The scale of these things is just mind-bending. And some of the things that the petabyte deals that I saw, $30,000 a month was child's play. And so that's why on the huge scale you don't worry about bandwidth costs, and on the smaller kind of the mid-sized scale you don't worry about it because it's bundled in.
But our debate is about cloud storage, not just enterprise cloud storage.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, sorry.
So we have one more question, then we'll
Yep.
go vote, and then
Okay.
talk realities.
Okay.
In your calculation of the storage cost up there.
Yes.
You said 50 terabytes was so much, but the fact is when you start out a new application, you're not going to be using 50 terabytes right off the get-go.
Exactly, you're
You're
using
going to build that up. So shouldn't your calculation be like half of that, of average 25 terabytes over the 6 years you're averaging?
It is, depending on the application, you could certainly say, but if we look at the kind of applications people are using cloud storage for at the 50 terabyte scale, it's archiving, and you're going to do a pretty large initial load, taking the data off of wherever it is now,
If you're taking it off of something.
and then it's going to grow. And so it might not be $260,000, it might be $160,000. It's not going to be quite half, but you have a point. It may ramp up. But then again, I could buy a smaller set of NASs and build them too. It's an oversimplified example, but
you're going to be buying some excess regardless. Another cloud storage myth is that people think that you generally have this massive load at the beginning, and in reality, most people don't do that. Most people just sort of start it with a net new application, just because of the nature of cloud storage. They'll start it with a new application, and so they won't have a massive load. And in fact, their first year use is fairly small. It's a fairly small number, which kind of hurts the business case for some of these companies, the service providers. But if you do have a massive load,
but then in the second year,
they go to the station wagon method. You don't generally try to pump that out the front door. You either install a second path or you.
A FedEx box full of LTO tapes.
They'll load from tape. They'll load from
is
tape.
about 400 megabits per second.
Yeah.
If you figure 24 hours transit time, and so
Latency's rough, but
But for that initial load, it doesn't matter.
So it does cut both ways. I imagine we could have cut down the cost, or Howard could have cut down the cost of the initial Aberdeen, but honestly, that seemed like a fairly small number to me, and I think most people too. Again, the reality of buying stuff in enterprise is usually you buy it when you've got the money, and you don't buy half of what you need, assuming you're going to get the money later, because honestly, at least in my experience, a lot of time the later never comes, and I have to make do with what I got. So I used to buy all sorts of crazy amounts of stuff because I knew it would get used eventually.
Well, and if you don't spend your budget this year, you don't get it next year.
Yeah. So.
Okay, so let's go ahead and take a vote. How many people think that cloud storage is DOA?
Yeah. Oh man. Wait, what are we voting on?
We're just voting on what we think they want to debate, not necessarily whether we agree with the position, correct?
Yeah, this is all about the debate, not the truth.
So, Howard. Steven.
No way!
Sorry, it was the unicorn tears that got me.
Let's take the other vote now.
Yeah, okay. How many think cloud storage actually has a useful purpose?
And how many people really think that cloud storage is dead on arrival?
All right.
Okay. All right.
Well,
Therefore,
we had fun.
Therefore, I actually voted it, even though I didn't. Thank you very much. All right.
Wow.